Hello, YouTube, and welcome back to another book review from me, your host, Logan Albright. Some weeks ago, I talked about the novel Mordew by Pheby, which I really loved. I thought it was startlingly original and captivating and a very interesting fantasy novel that's unlike any other fantasy novel that I'd ever read. And I gushed about it and said how great it was. Well, it has a sequel. And today I'm talking about Malarkoi by Pheby, Cities of the Weft, Book 2. Now, I use the word sequel a little bit loosely here, because while this is a continuation in some sense of the story, it's a little bit unusual as sequels go. It's not so much a direct continuation as sort of a filling out of the world and a filling out of some of the storylines and some of the other characters that were seen in the first book. It is basically follows 4 or 5 different threads of different characters who were and what they were doing at the end of the last book, and then what they continue to do after the end of the last book. And it jumps back and forth between these different plot lines. And really not that much happens in it. It's not really a plot-driven book. It's more about, deepening our understanding of the world, deepening our understanding of the characters, and just kind of filling things out a little bit more rather than directly continuing the story. And for this reason, I think it is not being well received. Again, I went on to Goodreads and looked at some reviews of this before I made this video, and there's a lot of negative reviews of this book. A lot of people really dislike it. And I can kind of understand why, because it's a difficult book to read. It's fairly abstract, and it doesn't directly continue the story as much as some other people might want it to. It kind of jumps around a lot and has a lot of backstory and follows a lot of different threads and doesn't really come to a conclusion, even though the first book also didn't really come to a conclusion. I can see why that would be unsatisfying for people. But I, for one, really appreciate its kind of experimental structure. It's just so radically different than other things I've read. It's so original. And at this time when everybody's talking about how AI is going to steal all the jobs and take away all the professions from creators and artists and writers and publishers and musicians, because AI is able to generate all this stuff automatically. Like, AI is never going to generate a book like this. This book is very original and very creative and very different. And I really appreciate it for that, and I like it. And I also like the world that Pheby has created, and I'm fascinated by it. And so I like the chance to get to spend more time in that world, to get to learn more about it and its inhabitants and all of its crazy, like, fairy tale oddities. I was thinking about what books this reminds me of, and it's a short list because it's a very original book. But one of the things that I think kind of distinguishes it from a lot of modern fantasy novels is its embracing of sort of unpredictable absurdity, a certain childishness, although it's a very adult book in a lot of ways. Like, it reminds me of worlds like The Wizard of Oz or Alice in Wonderland, where you just never know what's going to be around every corner. Every chapter, there's another like crazy, imaginative, fantastic thing that the author has created. And he's not that concerned with how they all fit into the broader world or the magic system. I know, like, Brandon Sanderson fans and a lot of modern fantasy fans, they're very obsessed with like magic systems, and everything has to be systematic and everything has to be logical and fit together in a coherent way. This is not really like that. This is like, here's a random collection of fairy tale tropes and objects and just things that the author has created that seem interesting and cool. The same way the Wizard of Oz has, the same way Alice in Wonderland has. Around every corner there's just something weird. And I love that. I think that kind of kaleidoscopic approach to fantasy is really engaging. It really just inspires me and makes me want to read more and learn more about the world. I don't care if it's that consistent. And one of the things about this book that's a little bit frustrating for me, but not that frustrating for me, is it kind of resists understanding. There's a lot of parts of the world that I don't really understand. They talk about the Weft a lot, meaning the kind of fabric of reality and the multiverse and all these different realities. Death doesn't seem to be a very permanent condition here. It seems very reversible. And how all that works is not really spelled out very well. And I don't really understand it. But I don't really care that I don't understand it, because this is a crazy fantasy world, and I'm not supposed to understand everything. I'm supposed to just kind of dip my toes into the water and see what's going on. And I like that. I like just not being 100% clear on what's happening, but being caught up in the mystery of it all, caught up in the magic of it all. And because when you're dealing with magic, you're not going to understand everything that happens. That's just the way magic works. So I'm really enjoying that. Now, from this point in the review on, I'm going to talk a little bit more in detail about the plot. And so there'll be some spoilers. If you have not read the original novel Mordew and you don't want it spoiled, then maybe turn off the video and go read that book first and come back. But I do want to talk about a little bit about the plot, such as it is. It's not a very plot-driven book. And I don't feel like I can really do that without discussing some details of what happened at the end of the last book. So I'm going to do that now. The last book ended with the protagonist, Nathan Treves, being caught by the master and being compressed into this locket, which is called the Tinderbox. And so for all intents and purposes, Nathan is dead for this entire book. He doesn't really show up in it. And he the master has that and he's trying to deal with it, but the master has his own difficulties. So the master is one of the threads that the book follows. It follows him trying to kind of regenerate his servant, Bellows, after the loss of his servant. He trying to make a new one, and most of the master story is consumed with him trying to make his replacement for Bellows. Not very much happens in it. Other threads involve Prissy and the mistress of Malarkoi's daughter, Dashini, and Gam, these kind of orphan criminal children from Mordew, who are hanging out with the mistress of Malarkoi's daughter, and they're trying to get back to the pyramid that the mistress lives in and trying to kind of restore her and have her make everything right again after Nathan killed her in the last book. But apparently she's not permanently dead, so they're going for that. And they have to travel through this crazy pyramid with all these different levels that are really just fantastical and strange, and lots of really odd imagery in all these things. And I want to read a little bit of that in a minute, but I'll get to that when we go through a few more of the threads. So Dashini's thread is another one. Another thread is the talking dogs, Sirius and Anaximander. They're split up on this one. Sirius has his own thread, and Anaximander is traveling with Bellows and Nathan's mother, Clarissa, and they have their own mission that they're on. So that's another thread that's being followed. So there's all these different threads, and because it's split up this way, you don't get a ton of plot development in each of them, but you get a lot of the world and what's going on in it, and you get to learn more about these characters. And I love Sirius and Anaximander, the talking dogs. Or Anaximander is a talking dog. Sirius doesn't talk, but he is a sentient dog. I love those characters. So you get some of that. Let me read just a little bit from one of the later chapters in this book, just because I think this chapter really kind of, just the first couple paragraphs of this chapter really summarize what the book is like, and you can get a taste for if it's the sort of thing you'd want to read. It's the kind of imaginative world building that I just love. So this is chapter 25, and it starts this way. It's taking place in the pyramid that Dashini and the others are trying to make their way through. The fifth level of the golden pyramid of Malarkoi was the realm of the King of Shadows. What was proper to him? Intuition says it should have been night there, since he was dark. It suggests that his should have been a diaphanous place, since he was as thin as fine silk. It should have been regal, as he was. None of these things were right. The intermediate nested pyramid realm, made by the mistress of Malarkoi for the patron god Le Roi de l'Ombre, was always in the brightest daylight. Indeed, there were 4 suns, and they lived in the sky at each other's hips like 4 unmarried sisters. These suns shone down the colors red, blue, green, and yellow, and they never set. It is light that makes shadows, and without any there can be none. So that's the kind of setting that this book takes place in. These crazy ideas of the King of Shadows and these 4 suns that are in 4 different colors, just things that are like dreamlike and kind of spark your imagination. And that's pretty much all we get about the King of Shadows and his realm, by the way. There's not much more about it. It's not like this is heavily developed. It's just tossed off as this crazy setting. And that happens all the time throughout the entire book. You get more and more of that just very imaginative prose. And I really like the prose. I will say I contrasted it with these children's books, Alice in Wonderland and The Wizard of Oz. It's not a children's book. It's very violent in parts. It's very bloody and gory in parts. It's very adult in parts. So I wouldn't recommend it to children. But if you're an adult fantasy reader and you like that kind of thing, and you also like that kind of imaginative world building, you might find it fun. Now, according to the author bio in the back of this book, this is a trilogy called Cities of the Weft. And this is book 2. So I'm presuming that there will be one more book. I did look, and there is listed on Amazon the third book of the city, which is called Water Black. The third book of the series, which is called Water Black, after one of the cities, the city that Nathan's father was the master of. And that's going to come out in 2025. So there will be at least one more book. Now, the fact that it's called a trilogy at the back leads me to believe that there's only going to be one more book, which makes me kind of sad because I'm enjoying this story a lot. And I feel like there's a lot of room to mine this world and to spend a lot more time here and tell a lot of side stories. But it appears like there's only going to be one more book in this series. Although Alex Pheby has also written books not in this series, which I haven't read. So those might be good too. But I will look forward to the third one coming out, and I will definitely read it when it is released. But for the time being, I just have to say that I really loved Malarkoi. It's very different than a traditional sequel. It's very strange and out of place with the modern fantasy genre, I think. It's very original, and for that reason, a lot of people didn't like it. But if you're willing to just kind of spend time in the world and not worry too much about plot development, I think you might enjoy it too. I really loved it, and that's all I have to say about that. So I'd like to know your thoughts. If you've read either of these books, please leave me comments down below. If you enjoyed this review, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. And check back next week for more book reviews because I try to post one every single Wednesday. It's a thankless job, but somebody's got to do it. I'll catch you next time. I've been your host, Logan Albright, and thanks so much for watching.